Before we actually get started with working with the ASP.NET, what you need to do is install the IIS server if you haven't done that. What you need to do is go to your control panel, and you're going to add or remove programs. Then you're going to select the add remove Windows components. And then you're going to get the screen that you can add your Windows components, and you're going to select Internet Information Server, and you're going to need at least the World Wide Web, as you can see, www service at least, and that's enough to get this going as long as you have the Internet Information Services snap in as well. At least those two things, but you can check everything if you wanted to. Not a big deal. And then that's going to install, and then you just have to make sure within your administrative tools, and then you can see Internet Information Services Manager there. And that's going to allow you to have this come up. You just need to start your default website, and that's going to get everything available so that you can get started. And then you just create a file new project, and you pick ASP.NET Web Application. You're going to be working with the local host or your IP address for your local machine, or if you're doing something on another server, specify that. Localhost is leading to your machine. 127.0.0.1 is also pointing to your local host, which is pointing to you. And this is on XP, of course. :80 is the port, and then you can just give it a name. And then it will create your application. We've already got one here. We have a test. You can see that we have the global ASE file, our web config file, and assembly information that you could update as well. Our references going to that system.xml, web, etc. And then we have a default page that comes in, Web Form 1. You can right-click here to view the source. Once you bring that up, HTML source. This is HTML source. You're going to see that we have this page language, C# here in the language. Code behind is going to be our CS file that's automatically built for us. Like I mentioned, ASPX.CS is our web form. You can see that it's going to be called Web Form 1. That's the name. It matches our file name. And we have some other information here as well, including an inherits, because this page is going to inherit from this web behind the scenes code page, as you can see. So if we right-click here on our file, we can actually view the code, which is going to view that code behind file, as you can see. And this is what's going to be in place there. You see we have a lot of namespaces that are added there, and it's going to create a namespace as usual, as we're used to. It's going to create a web form 1, which is like form 1, which is going to derive from system.web.ui.page. And then you see a default page load event, as we'll get into. A regular event handler, object sender, system.event.args, if you've seen this in the Windows Forms videos or in the event handler videos. And then you have additional buttons up here that you can look at things as well. Viewing the code, we have the designer view, which will get that designer view back for you. And you can work with copying the project, refreshing the view, and show all files is great because it allows you to see all the files that are associated with that. Global.ASPX also has a code behind file, as you can see. If you double click on that, it's going to have a different view because we're looking at XML data, so we're going to have a data view that we can look at here. Just a little bit of a different thing that you can take a peek at. But we won't concentrate on that. We're going to be working with our web forms. So your web form, you can actually add it by right-clicking here. Add a new item, an existing item. If it exists somewhere else, it's going to be copied to your web root folder, which is a project within your default website. It's a special project there. You can go and take a look at the name there. It's a virtual directory. And you can see that within the IIS Manager if you're familiar with that. Not a big deal if you don't know how to use that, but it's not important at this point because Visual Studio automatically sets that up for you. So you can add a web form, a user control, another HTML page, whatever you need to get started, including web services and things like that. So we'll just add a new web form. Then we pick what we want to add, of course, but it's going to pick web form for us, similar to how we work with templates with our Windows forms. We click open, it adds it to the project. Same thing, ASPX file, and then a code behind .cs file. We can right click here to view HTML also from here, the code, the designer, etc. Now you can work with your toolbox open if you want to, just like we work with Windows Forms, and you can just drag things on if you want to. You can see you can move them around the grid. You can see that we're looking at the grid here by turning this on and off. And we can snap to the grid, if we want to snap our objects to the grid, when we do that, we right-click here to view the HTML. This is a quick way to get started with ASP.NET, of course, just so we can get through the examples. If you're familiar with ASP.NET or familiar with ASP, this is going to look pretty similar to what you've been working on. You're going to see that we're going to add styling because we're working with the grid. So that positioning is going to add those HTML styling elements, which is important for styling and using dynamic HTML to position things. That's really something you want to cater to if you're actually going to be doing intranets. You want to try to skip that. We can right-click View Design. Skip that if you're going to be doing for the web, because the code you get from Visual Studio isn't optimized. You want to keep your pages very clean, so you don't necessarily want to work with the snapping on or the grids. And this is going to allow you to just place things very, very nicely and neatly. Visual Studio for .NET and working with your ASP pages, this can be good for adding controls and things like that, but you really want to invest in Dreamweaver to get some really good ASP.NET code use. But for the most part, that's getting around and working just on the ASP.NET level, so we can look at our examples.